Well, everybody, today we have a special episode. My dad is joining us, David Brinker Sr. That's where I got my name. And he's joining remotely because we weren't able to get together. But I like your cowboy hat.
You want to buy it?
No, I don't. I don't want to buy it. I can't get away with cowboy hats. You know that.
Actually, my oldest son gave this to me for my birthday. I like it.
Yeah, no, it's a really cool hat. Dad and I have been meaning to do this for quite a while. So I'm going to give a little bit of history for those that either just started following me or maybe you've been following along with the story, but don't really know my dad. So my dad is my best friend and also a business partner of mine. I grew up in a rural part of Oregon, him and my mom, I think raised three really good kids, my two brothers, Luke and Blake. And I'm hoping to dive into family history, how we were raised, where we came from, what made the crazy man that I am. I think I'm going to learn some stuff along the way too. So I appreciate you guys doing this. And then also you can watch the full episodes on video if you like watching, if you prefer that. And you can go to the Altitude Show on YouTube and subscribe. And all of these videos, plus all the other episodes that we recorded are on there, including tons of short clips from episodes. So you guys should go check those out. Last thing before we get started, make sure you support our sponsors. They support us. It helps me a lot if you guys go and support Peaks Equipment, Go Hunt, an outdoor class, and use the code Altitude on all three of those places for their products and services. They're amazing companies. It helps support the show and helps the show keep going if you use that code Altitude. I appreciate it. So with all that said, we're going to dive in here. Dad, you ready to get grilled?
Grill me.
So I want to start out from the beginning because which is your dad and your family and where they came from. Could you tell us a little bit about, I call them Papa and Nanny, a little bit about where they came from and a little bit of their history?
My mother was born in New Jersey. My father was born in Pennsylvania, just across the Delaware River. And they met at my grandfather's doctor's office, began dating, got married. He eventually joined the service in the Coast Guard. After they got married, they moved to Chicago, where he finished his education and became a chiropractor. And at that point in his life, he had always loved to hunt and fish, but the East Coast wasn't satisfying his appetite for it. He heard about the elk and the deer and the fish out west. So I think it was in 1950 or 1951, they loaded up their little car, a little 13-foot trailer, and my oldest sister, Linda, and headed west, not knowing where they were going to end up or what they were going to do when they got there. He had his chiropractor license, and they headed west and came to Oregon.
So what? They just started driving? Because, obviously, this is, what'd you say, 1950 what?
Yeah, 1951.
1951. Yeah. There's obviously no internet, no map. I mean, there's physical maps.
Nope.
There's no cell phones. What do you do? Just start driving east?
He's driving west. And
did they have a goal in mind?
His goal was Oregon because of the salmon. He had seen pictures of the salmon and steelhead, and he wanted to get to the salmon and steelhead, but they had no idea what it was going to look like when they got here. And he always told me the further they got west, as it got desolate, like South Dakota, North Dakota, Wyoming, my mother said, if the whole West Coast is going to look like this, you can turn around and take me back to New Jersey because I'm not going to live here. So they kept going, and they actually ended up in a town called Klamath Falls, Oregon, which at that time I am told wasn't much. And again, my mother expressed she wasn't very excited about that part of the world either, as it's kind of a high desert. And so they started driving north. Oh, he had a friend that had come a little before him, and he had settled in Silverton, Dr. Ralph Schmidt. And Ralph told him, no, you need to come further north. So they drove up and they entered the Willamette Valley, and they started falling in love with it. And they ended up in a little town called Dallas, which is where I am now. And they settled. This is where they settled.
How many people were in Dallas?
It's like a wagon train.
Yeah. At that time, so Dallas, Oregon currently is what, like 25,000 people, something like that.
20,000, I think, maybe.
Yeah. At that time, what was it? Just a couple thousand, maybe?
Yeah, I think maybe 2000, because I remember when I was a young child seeing a sign entering Dallas where it said 4,200, and I was already like 10 or 12 years old. So it had grown. Yeah, I think it was about 2,500 when Dad came here.
So before he came out there, he was obviously interested. I remember seeing pictures, actually not even pictures. He used to have, he had a couple smallmouth bass mounted on his wall from a river in Pennsylvania, right? What
The
river was
Delaware
that?
River.
The Delaware River. Okay.
The Delaware.
So he was a pretty hardcore fisherman before he came to Oregon, back in Pennsylvania, but he was also into health, which I want to talk about. So tell us a little bit about his weightlifting to start.
He was actually one of the best weightlifters or greatest weightlifters in the country in the 30s. And he basically all he did was train, lift weights, eat properly, lived a healthy life. And by about 1937 or 38, he was one of the best light heavyweights in the country. They did 3 lifts. They did a clean and jerk, a snatch, and a press. And then they would add that total at these events. And they had a team that they put together in Easton, Pennsylvania, that actually, I can't remember the name of the club, the weight club, but they had a weight club, and they were out of Lehigh, and they would go and take on other clubs around the East Coast, the East Coast, Midwest, so forth and so on. And he repeatedly would win his weight class in those. And the truth of the matter is that he told me that in 1939 that he was the top candidate to win the spot on the 1940 Olympic team at 181 pounds.
Whoa. As
the weightlifting guy. But the World War started. And the Olympics were going to be in Berlin, and they were canceled, and blah. And so then he went in the service, and it never developed. But he, kind of fast forwarding here, he never quit weightlifting. I can remember the last few years of his life, and he died when he was 92, prior to when he actually moved into a retirement center, as he called it, the Golden Years house. He still lifted weights 2 or 3 nights a week by himself in the garage, bench pressing, doing presses, curls for a half hour to 45 minutes. When he was in his mid to late 80s, he was still doing that.
Wow.
And he died eating an ice cream cone, so there must be something to
it. Like in the 30s, I have no context for, because even I feel like fitness has really boomed the last couple decades. You know, it's become more popular. But like, I can only imagine in the 1930s what type of vision it would have had to have taken to be that disciplined in something that even to this day most people aren't disciplined in, including myself.
Yeah, and they didn't. And of course, they didn't have the discipline and also equipment. The equipment they had was primitive. I mean, what they had was free weights. What he did a lot of is he had him and his brother built I think it was a 4x4, and on either end of it they poured a cement form, so it was like a 200 pounds or 250 pound weight on a 4x4, and Dad would put that up over his neck and go around the block where he lived there in Easton doing, what is it called when you do that and you go down on the knee and then you come up and you take a step and you go down on the other knee. He would go around the block doing that to warm up. I think he said it was 200 or 250 pounds with a 4x4 and cement on your back going around the block. But they didn't have anything. They had free weights. Mm-hmm. And he also told me that when they were really in the height of it, they trained mostly by eating just meat, a lot of meat, and drinking.
Move a little closer to the mic, Dad. Meat and drinking beer?
Ale. Mm-hmm.
Well, ale is beer, right?
Yeah.
That was kind of the older wisdom for putting on muscle, right? Like
bulk.
Yeah.
Yep.
Protein. And and beer. Because
Yeah.
I remember even when you were lifting when I was a kid, you guys used to do that. There was like a keg of beer in your in your
We
garage
always
gym
had
down
a
at the
keg of
neighbor's
beer.
house.
Always had a keg of beer in the gym, which is really probably not something they do anymore. But
I think that science has been proven wrong, but that's all right. Uh, but also not only the weightlifting, but he was really into what would now be considered pretty mainstream health habits, including eating organic. And I remember when I was a kid watching him drink fruit smoothies every morning, which wasn't cool back then. I remember watching him eat raw eggs, which wasn't cool back then. I remember him drinking goat's milk and taking supplements before supplements were cool. I remember him talking about taking cold showers all the time. Like, it still impresses me to this day, Dad, how forward thinking your dad was. But I've always just wanted to know how and why was he that forward thinking? Like, who was he looking up to that helped him do that?
there was a guy, and I want to say his name was Steinke.
Hmm.
One of the guys' name was Steinke, and I'm trying to think of the name of the guy that started the big weightlifting movement back in York, Pennsylvania. And I'm drawing a blank on it. But those were kind of two of his heroes, mentor people, and his father was also not a weight trainer or anything like that, but his father and his whole family were health minded. No white sugars, no processed foods, raw milk, just all the stuff that transformed later into how I was brought up. I actually never had cow's milk until I was 19 years old. We drank
Now,
raw
what
goat's milk.
what was the problem with cow's milk as opposed to goat's milk?
It was homogenized.
Oh,
He
okay.
didn't want it processed. He wanted it straight out of the animal.
So why couldn't you have
And
just gotten?
yeah, we had.
Why
We
couldn't you
always
just
had it.
have gotten? Why couldn't you have just gotten raw cow's milk?
I don't know whether that was even available when I was in the time frame that I'm talking about. Maybe you could, but I know he liked raw goat. He wanted us to drink raw goat's milk. We had raw goat's milk smoothies every night. At when he'd get up from the office, he'd say, "I'm going to make a peach drink," and what it was frozen peaches in an osterizer with raw goat's milk. And if you could put raw honey on it if you wanted to kick it up a notch, but we did those just almost every night of my childhood. And it's funny you said something about cold water, because I was thinking this morning as when I was taking a shower, my father took cold showers every morning after his hot shower. He finished it with a cold shower, and he would scream like a hyena when he was doing it and laugh. And I was thinking this morning, I don't have the huevos to do that. I don't want to do that.
Well, you know how popular that is now, right?
Oh yeah, the reason I
mean,
was even
everybody every 5 seconds there's someone on my Instagram feed doing a cold plunge, and the value of direct contact with cold water is really mainstream, and that's why I mentioned it, because I remember the same thing, and I've been trying to do it. Our buddy Joel Turner, when he was out here about a month ago, was giving me shit because I don't take cold showers all the time. So I've been trying to do it too. I definitely have to mix it in with a hot shower. I can't just jump right into a freezing cold shower. I got to work into it. But yeah, that's absolutely incredible that he was that forward thinking. I would have loved to have, I wish I could have asked him what he believed the benefits of doing that were, and if those match what science has sort of proven now.
Yeah, because we never really got into that part of it. You probably remember when you were younger, you weren't little, but we were camped over at the Metolius with Dad and Mom and all my sisters and when everybody was still around. And Dad went out. The Metolius River in Oregon is really cold. I mean, it is cold.
It is really fucking cold. Like, it is
really cold. I mean,
I don't know how cold it is. I could probably look it up, but it is really cold.
So he weighed out. He was probably approaching 80 years old at that point, 77, 78, 79, 80. He waded out in that river with a swimsuit on, laid down in the river, grabbed a hold of a boulder, and stayed submerged under there for 8 or 10 seconds, and came out again laughing and yelling like a hyena, and just thought it was wonderful.
Yeah, so I just looked it up. It's right around 48 degrees.
Okay.
It's really cold.
That's cold.
Yeah, and incredible, incredible, and the diet that he was on. I mean, even today, again, it's so amazing to me. So okay, so you guys, he gets to Oregon. Did he find what he wanted? Was he happy when he got there?
Yeah,
Obviously.
I think he was when he got to Dallas. I think they liked it. It was green. It was a ways from the rivers on the coast, but it was close to his friends that had come before him. Ralph Schmidt was just 30 minutes north, and the guy named Moose Brackey was just over in Salem. And these are all acquaintances that he had from back east. So there was kind of a little community of them that came here, and they weren't very far apart, and they each had their own individual businesses or practices set up. So, and then it didn't take long to get to the coast, and they had deer hunting out his front door basically, and all the things that he wanted, that he came here for, were here. That's why he stayed here.
And so he started his chiropractor practice in Dallas.
Uh-huh.
And when he wasn't doing that, he was pretty much fishing and hunting, right? Or camping.
Yes, he fished every Thursday. He took Thursdays off, so he fished Thursdays, and then every weekend we would go camping or go somewhere. But Thursdays were kind of like his men's day at the golf course. That was the day that he took off during the week, and he would, if it was fishable, he'd go fishing. If it was deer season, he'd go deer hunting. That was kind of his day that he took.
What's your first memory of life?
Finding a Indian arrowhead in Guano Creek at Hart Mountain.
For those that don't know what that is, give a little bit more context. Not the
Well,
arrowhead, but Hart Mountain and that area and that era.
Hart Mountain is a mountain range in southeastern Oregon that attracted my father back in the 50s, early in the 50s when he first got here, for archery hunting for deer. So he would take our entire family over there in the little 13-foot trailer that they pulled out from back east and trudge on over to Hart Mountain. And for the weekend, he'd leave on Friday night. It's an 8-hour drive. Well, actually, back then it was probably a 12-hour drive. Think about
because most of it was dirt roads back then, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember getting in there right at daylight. He would get him and Ralph. They'd all get their stuff out and they'd take off for the day. They'd hunt Saturday, Sunday morning, then we'd load back up, and they would drive all the way back home so that they could work on Monday. But Hart Mountain was a part of me way back then. But the first thing I remember, long before I can remember the drive over or anything like that, is standing in Guano Creek and looking down. And I think I've showed you the exact spot. It's the exact spot. It still looks the same in the aspens down there in the lower end of Guano Creek. And there was a broadhead in there, an Indian broadhead, about an inch or inch and a half long or whatever, perfect Indian broadhead. And that's one of my first memories of life. The next one is my sister Margie coming home from the hospital, which was not long after that.
What was she in the hospital for?
She was being born.
Oh, I was sorry. I was
Mom,
confused.
yeah, Mom was pregnant when we were over there at Hart Mountain that year. Mom was, she'd have been 7 months pregnant.
Wow. So Linda was how old? Your oldest sister was how old at this point?
Well, Linda would have been 6 or 7, and Alma would have been 4 or 5, and I was 2.
Okay. Now, your dad and Ralph and those guys, they were hunting. How are they hunting, and what were they doing?
They were jump shooting with archery equipment. What do you mean? What were they doing? They didn't have binoculars. They had back quivers full of arrows, recurves, and longbows. I think Dad was a longbow. He's still back then before he went to recurve. But all they did was, there were so many mule deer there at that time that all they did was they would spread out like 50 to 75 yards apart and just walk out through the tall sagebrush and jump shoot the deer. That's what they do.
Did they ever get any like that?
They got a couple. I know Ralph actually shot a deer with his longbow at over 100 yards.
There was a huge volume of arrows going out. So partially probably was pretty lucky.
Oh my! Oh yeah, I just remember Dad telling stories about it, stories and stories and stories about it, which made me even become more and more attached to the whole idea of when I got of age to go hunting at Hart Mountain and be a part of it, and it led up to the very first time that I did actually have a hunting license and a deer tag, and I was 12 years old, and Dad bought me a recurve bow, which I couldn't hit a cardboard box at 4x4 cardboard box at 15 feet, but I had sharp broadheads and I had a back quiver and I had a recurve, and we commenced to go over to Heart Mountain, and we got there in the middle of the day about noon. The whole family, Ralph, his guys, Steve DeShaw, and we shot a few arrows at a box by the creek, and then we took off. And Steve and I went together, and Dad and Ralph took off another direction. Steve and I crossed the creek and stepped into the patch of sagebrush on the other side of the creek. And this wasn't 200 yards from where we camped. And bucks just started standing up everywhere. I mean, there must have been 6 or 8 different bucks, and they were all, 3 and 4 points. How big whatever. I was 12 years old. It was, 1964. It didn't matter. And Steve and I both shot all of our arrows.
Did you hit anything?
Hell no. We didn't hit anything. We had trouble finding our arrows. Well, no, we did not hit anything. I remember arrows. I think that was the beginning of my target panic, right there. I remember just shooting arrows and just watching arrows go. We found some of them, or most of them. Got a lecture that night from Dad that you just can't go shooting your arrows out through the sagebrush like that into the rocks. You need to watch, see where they go. So reloaded the quiver. And that next day we went out, and I was walking by myself on this plateau, and I went over to the edge of this rim, and I looked off the rim, and there was I can know the exact spot. It was in the head of Willow Creek. I could walk to it right now. There was probably a 28 or 30 inch wide 4-point standing right straight below me, about 50 yards straight below me, which I have absolutely no business shooting at with that bow, but I did. And the arrow went boo like that, and it went right on the outside or on the front edge of his left hoof, and stuck him in the leg. And he took 2 jumps, and the arrow fell out on the ground. And I watched him go clear down across the canyon and way up the other side and across the next plateau, and he was gone. And I thought, God, I got to go tell Dad that I just killed a deer. And so I went looking for Pop. And I don't remember the details of what he told me, but he came over there and, he said, where went down there? And he goes, and I showed him where it went down. He goes, well, he says, Dave, he says, you didn't kill that deer. He goes, you didn't kill a deer. We went down there and found the arrow. There wasn't even any blood on the arrow. I mean, it just literally, it might've been doing like 22 feet a second when it hit it. But I remember the deer, it took 2 jumps and the arrow fell out, and I thought, I got one. That's why Heart Mountain's deer. Those stories go on and on for Heart Mountain until current days, and that's
true.
That's why
that's true.
First memory of life is so special.
It's so crazy to think that some of those arrows are still up there. I mean, I know that
they are.
They're wood, and so they're probably the wood part's gone, but those heads and those, like, there's pieces of those arrows still up there somewhere, which is pretty crazy.
The plastic, the Knox.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Absolutely. That's amazing. Yeah, Heart Mountain. You continued that tradition as we were born, taking us there. Even to this day, I mean, you just had the antelope tag, 2 years ago? I had the deer tag about 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. I've had the antelope tag before, and my son now a couple generations past what we were just talking about, my son still begs to go to Heart Mountain. So it's a really special place for those that have never been there. You live anywhere near Oregon, even on the west side of Idaho or the north side of Nevada or the west side of Utah or the southern side of Washington, you're within, hours of an amazing place. The hunting is no longer great because of a multitude of issues, but it is really a cool place to take your family and research the Native American history and the hunting history. And it still is an antelope refuge. So there's quite a few antelope there. You can draw, they have deer tags, antelope tags, rifle, bow, muzzleloader. Pretty hard to draw if you're non-resident. But anyways, that's enough about Heart Mountain, because I actually don't want a bunch of people to go there. So I'm just kidding. We can share.
Well, I can tell you that the closing of the loop for me at Heart Mountain was when you were able to kill that mature buck here a couple, 3 years ago with Matt Brimmer, when you were over there hunting, and I spent a couple, 3 days with you there, and there were a handful of deer around there at that point, not a great many, but you accomplishing that was really special for me, even though I had come home. That was super cool because that's just the top of the ladder for me, the Heart Mountain thing. So.
Yeah, that was a special hunt. My buddy Matt Brimmer, who lives down Southern Oregon, who also finds solace in Heart Mountain. He was able to come help me on that. Actually, he had a tag too, and I had never I'd been on many deer hunts there, but I'd never had my own tag until I was in my upper 30s. I'd helped other people a lot, so when I finally got it, I was really, really excited. And it was a really hard hunt. There's just the deer population there sucks now. And I think we saw 2 or 3 mature bucks in 7 days. And on the very last morning that we had to hunt, we found a buck in a place I've never been, and I've never been since. Super remote part of the mountain, just hiding in this little hidey hole. We just kind of took a risk and looked off this one rim, and there he was. And he bedded on a juniper mesa where you could not see where he bedded. It was a blind stalk that took most of the day of getting over to that juniper mesa and basically going 2 steps at a time, glassing, 2 steps at a time, glassing for like, I don't remember how many hours. I want to say it was 4 or 5 hours that Matt and I did that in the blazing hot heat. Because this is out in the desert. This was on the desert side of the mountain. And finally we came around a juniper and saw his tines laying there, and I was able to get him. The craziest thing is where he died, I found a human grave that the refuge manager didn't even know about. I could walk to it now. I tried to describe it to them so they could go look for it, but it was a special moment. And I could see the main peak of the mountain behind me, which is where we memorialized my grandfather. We think of that as his spot. So we go up there and we have visits with him and try to go up there every year. So it was just a really special place. So I'm thankful that he drove probably a station wagon or something down there in the 50s and started going there. So that's pretty cool. So Dad, you grew up in the outdoors. I mean, you grew up, you predominantly rifle hunted when you were younger, but you were also learning steelhead and salmon, and that was kind of all you cared about, right?
I actually didn't fish for steelhead and salmon a lot when I was younger until I could drive myself, because Dad was usually only going fishing for the steelhead and salmon on Thursdays, and that, of course, obviously, I would have to be in school. And so my exposure to the salmon came at a later time and was not necessarily taught to me by my father. I made acquaintances at the coast, and later in life, when I was 17, 18, 19 years old, found people who were successful, very successful at it, and kind of attached myself to them and sucked all the information I could get from them. And that's when I started fishing. Dad had me hunting from when I was old enough to hunt. And prior to that, I would go with him on hunting trips. I'm archery hunting for elk before, when I was just walking along, deer hunting. When I turned 12, got a rifle and killed a deer when I was 12, my first deer when I was 12.
By the way, a giant mule deer. It's not just that.
No, that was actually.
Oh no, that was a small one. It was the next one that was a pretty big one.
Yeah. The next, because in the next year, I killed the little one the first year, and then the next year, Dad actually got a different rifle, and he gave me his rifle, his 7mm, and I was only 13. And right at daylight, one morning, we're looking way out in front of us. No binoculars. If you saw a deer, you held your scope up to look at it. Those guys didn't use binoculars. And saw a really mature buck going off kind of into this rim area. And later that day, maybe noon or 1 o'clock, Dad was way off to the right of me, several hundred yards. And I was going towards where I saw that buck go off that rim. And I walked up to that rim, just as skyline as you can possibly get. And that buck was laying on the other side of that canyon, about 100 yards or 150 yards across that canyon. And he looked at me and stood up and started to jump. And I just pulled that rifle up and shot him. And he rolled. He was just shot him. And Dad came over and goes, "What'd you shoot? What'd you shoot?" And I said, "I got a really nice buck, Dad." I said, "He rolled all, Anyway, we crossed over, went down the room, got down there, and it ended up being like a 28-inch wide, 29-inch wide, 4-point mule deer buck, a pretty mature buck. And that was when, I think that's when I really, really started thinking that I really loved hunting, that I wanted to hunt. And so for the next bunch of years, I hunted a lot with rifle. As I got older and I actually could drive, had buddies here, and we got into the blacktail thing. I'd skip school. If it was great hunting conditions and the bucks were running and the weather was right, school didn't exist. We went buck hunting. And if we were tagged out, we took people. If they were tagged out, we found more people to take. We basically tried to demolish the blacktail herd in the mountains of the Coast Range of Oregon.
Yeah, and you did a good job of it, because there's none left. So thank you. Well, that was just the culture back then, right?
That was the culture. It was the culture.
For better or worse, it was, and the management practices have evolved over time, and we've all learned from it.
They were pathetic back then. It was pathetic.
Yeah. I mean, you guys. So, Papa, your dad, leased a couple different ranches when you were a kid. One of those ranches, I ended up growing up hunting as well, and you guys used to take, and we're talking, you're on the Barjay. You were only hunting probably like less than half of it, a third of it for mule deer.
Third.
And which would probably be what, like a few thousand acres?
I would probably about 5,000. Yeah. 5,000.
Okay. So 5,000 acres. You guys were taking like what, $25-$30 a year off that thing?
Whenever we start telling stories about the mule deer hunting back in those days, and this was back, when we started leasing the ranch in that John Day country, I believe that I would have been maybe 19 or 20 years old. So that would have been 1972, 1973. And when we first started leasing it, there were no deer there. There literally were no deer there. It was very sparse. They had a big die-off. Something had happened in the late 60s. There had been a big population prior to that. And so when we first started hunting at that ranch, the first year we hunted that ranch, we killed one deer, a spike buck. They were legal. That's the one deer we got. The next year, we might have gotten 3 or 4. And it just started getting better and better. And by the time it peaked, just on the part of the ranch that we hunted, we would have 22 tags, 22 people in camp, and we would fill, those tags would get filled. And that was probably went on for 4 or 5 years at that level. And on the other part of the ranch, the guy who owned the ranch, they didn't hunt until the last weekend of the ranch, and last weekend of the season, he would invite all of his family over, and I'm talking about a lot of people, 30 people, 35 people, or whatever, and they would make this drive, and they would start on one end of this ridge and make a drive to the other end of the ridge. They'd have lunch, and they'd turn around and come back, and I don't want to screw up. And that was their hunt. And they did the same thing the second day of the last weekend. They did it 2 days. But I remember the one year, and I wish my Brad or Blake was here to make sure I'm not going to exaggerate it, because I think it was 28 going down and 9 coming back. But I'm going to say 21 going down the ridge and 9 coming back after lunch is what they killed that one year on that ridge. Now, remember, that's the same year that we took 22 bucks off the other part of the ranch. And many of these deer are not, they're shooting everything. That, we weren't shooting everything. I definitely wasn't shooting everything. We were shooting nicer bucks. And it was phenomenal. It was phenomenal. I don't even know what else to say. And you tell people these stories, and they look at you like you're a crazy old bastard, and you're making this couldn't be true. Yeah, right. Those are the good days. I fortunately can show you photos of our meat poles.
Oh my God. I have gone through. So my dad had many photo albums and just stacks of pictures and bags of physical pictures. Because remember, the digital world didn't exist yet. And as a kid, I would go through and memorize all the bucks. And so trust me, this did happen, and they were shooting some giants.
Yeah, there were some
And
giants.
and it continued for a while, and then it declined for a multitude of reasons. One of which you guys were shooting too many, and you know that now, but that wasn't
Oh
something
yeah,
that was in your head at the
absolutely.
time,
And,
obviously.
and another thing that really happened to us on the Barge, David, is that the elk moved in. When we first
Mm,
started, when the deer population was really big, they hunted elk a little bit around that part of the country, but all the ranchers would get together and look for tracks of a herd, and then they would get a hold of each other and they'd go track those elk down and try to get those elk. By
right.
the time we left Fox Valley in that country, it had become inundated with elk, and there were very few mule deer. And I don't know what that has anything to do with. I'm not a biologist, but I know that I saw a big balance go. No elk, absolutely no elk. I remember the first elk I saw on that ranch, to where you and I and everybody were over there bow hunting them, and on any good given morning, and when we have good visibility, and they're coming up out of the desert, there you can see 200 or 250 of them.
Right.
Just in a time span of 20 years.
Right.
Just a
Right.
weird reversal.
No,
Weird.
a lot's changed in Oregon. Macro level, a lot's changed in Oregon. One, you guys, you and everybody else, because the culture was like, shoot as many as you can, call your friends and family, have them shoot as many as you can. There was that. There was predator management issues. The bill that passed in 1991 banning the use of dogs for mountain lions. So, the
Yeah.
mountain lion population has changed. Some hard winters. A multitude of it's a complicated problem. But the mule deer population is not what you just described anymore in Oregon.
No,
The
no.
genetics in that area are still there. Um,
Yep.
and there's some people that have pretty good hunts there, but it's not like that. I mean, it's just like the steelhead and salmon fishing on the west side of Oregon, Dad. You experienced the 60s, 70s, and even early to mid 80s steelhead and salmon fishing here that I can't even fathom. Like a good day of steelhead fishing now, if you go over to the coast and you're fishing, all the holes that everybody else has to fish, you catch a fish or two, you've had a whopper of a day.
Yeah,
Um,
hook two or three, or hook 4 or 5 fish between two of you fishing all day, and it's a good day.
yeah, it's a
I mean,
really
there
good
could be
day.
something better than that, but a lot of times it's nothing. You get
A lot
nothing,
of times
nothing.
it's nothing. But back when you were doing it, it was the same as your mule deer hunting. It was just feast all the time. And
It
again,
was,
complicated issues, hatchery issues, dam issues,
yeah,
overfishing, blah blah blah
yeah,
blah blah. But it is fun to listen to those stories and just imagine what it would be like. But I also keep in perspective that um, my stories will be just as special to my son. Like my hunting
absolutely.
experiences are probably going to be better than my son. I hope they still have great hunting and fishing experiences, but most likely he'll be like, man, it sounds like the elk really bugled back when you were a kid, Dad. Now they're just call shy and blah, blah, blah. I think it's kind of the same from generation to generation because things change and a lot of times things get worse, unfortunately, when it comes to this stuff. So, but that's amazing. So you you then met Mom and got
Hmm.
married,
Hmm.
and you had a few kids, 3 boys, myself, my older brother Luke, my younger brother Blake, and I want to talk a little bit about our childhood because I think about it a lot. Obviously, I was there, but my memory is not. It's not the sharpest memory. I'm kind of an airhead, but I remember so many things when I really sit down and stew about it. We grew up in the country on what started out as about 20 acres, I think, Dad, right?
Hmm.
And
Yep.
then so I found myself most days with either my BB gun or my bow out in our woods. We had these, we had woods. We had the neighboring property had a couple ponds on it. We had permission to go walk down there, catch bass and crappie and bluegill, and hunt squirrels and quail and grouse and all the frogs. I mean, I remember shooting bullfrogs. Everything that we could hunt or
You guys
fish.
shot everything.
out of our back door, I did with my Red Ryder BB gun or my pump BB gun or my blacktail recurve bow that was made for me when I was a kid. So I remember all of that stuff, but what I don't remember is, what I want to talk about, I do remember it is the reason I was able to do that, and the reason I kind of wanted to emulate is emulate you and Papa and my idols were because you showed me all these pictures and told me all these stories, and I used to pretend I was you guys at the ranch, and it kind of all worked together really well. I was really fortunate to grow up out in the woods like that. But tell me from your perspective, did you push that on us? Did you want that, or did you just kind of it's just the way it happened?
It's the way it happened because you could see as you all grew up, you could see the how you each accepted what my passions were, my hunting and my fishing. Because that's basically what I did back then for entertainment. It was pre-golf. It was, you from the very beginning had a fire for it. You and our little friend Brent Erickson, who would come out to the house all the time. You guys were relentless. I can remember you sitting up on Friday nights after school. He'd come over and you'd have pieces of 8.5 by 11 paper on the kitchen table, drawing your plans as to how and where you're going to make your way through the woods the next morning and try to catch up with these deer or raccoons or possums or whatever you were hunting. You had plans and how you're going to do it. And you'd take off in the morning and you'd come back and get something to eat in the middle of the day and then take off and be gone again until almost dark. Not even sure I want to know how many things you shot at that you weren't supposed to shoot at, but I know I several times had to tell you, don't shoot at the deer.
Yeah, we weren't yet old enough to shoot at the deer, but I remember, I remember launching rubber blunts at deer and all kinds. We didn't ever hit anything that I can remember. But yeah,
do you remember your plans that you made? Do you remember making those plans?
Now that you say that, I remember because we named every portion of our property, and I still remember some of the names. Every little, let's call it acre had a name, and we used to plan where we wanted to hunt, and a lot of those names were the same names from the ranch because my best friend Brent, who Dad referenced, is okay. So, Dad, hold on just 1 second. I got a crying kid. We can edit this out. Come here, Davy. Come here, Davy. What happened?
You just slammed the door in my foot.
Okay, I'm on a podcast, so this is inappropriate.
I know. I told Davy that, and he said that.
Okay, Davy, don't hit anything. Okay, stop. Listen. Take a breath. Take a breath. You're gonna be okay. Easton, did you apologize? Okay. Be careful, guys. I'm on a podcast, okay? You're okay, Davey. Close my door. Close my door. All right. I'll edit that part out. What was I talking about, Dad?
We were talking about the maps and the...
Oh, yeah.
And the...
Yeah, so Brent Erickson, who I grew up with, is my dad's best friend's son. And Brent Erickson has actually turned into probably one of the best elk hunters I know. No one knows who he is. He doesn't want to be known, but he's killed so many incredible elk, mostly with a recurve and a longbow, and mostly with an average of about 12 yards, which I don't think many people can say. Anyways, Brent at the time was my number one friend, still one of my best friends. But he was out at our house all the time, and that's all we did. I remember Mom yelling for us at dinner time, and we would be like a half mile away. I could barely hear her voice, David. And it was those memories to me are worth gold. I mean, I think that's what it shaped me in so many ways. And just back then, the parenting style was so different. You guys, like, talk about free range parents. You guys just let us go out there. I mean, we had our 22s a lot too. It wasn't just
Absolutely.
BB guns and bows. We would take our scope 22s and just go hunting all day when I don't know how old we were, but we weren't 12. We were pretty young. And we were very safe. And Luckily, never had
Well,
an accident.
I didn't have concerns about that because you guys had trained, all of you were trained and had been brought up around little guns. And that's how I was when I was 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. I had a friend that lived not very far from Salt Creek on the end of May Road. And there was a cabin up on the hill that belonged to Bill Harlan. And on weekends, mom and dad or Alma, when she drove, would take me up to Rob's house, and dad would give me a brick of 22 shells, 522 shells. And I had a single shot 22. And Robbie and I would hike up to that little cabin and spend the night up there at that cabin and just shoot stuff with the 22s. I mean, that's what we did. And that's the same thing. So when you started doing that, although mom had to adjust to it, it wasn't a concern of mine because we talk so much about guns, and I kind of, maybe I trusted you too much, but it's how I was
think it worked out pretty well. It worked out pretty well until later on in my childhood. We were, so at that same ranch we mentioned, folks, my dad used to guide rifle elk hunters in return for some archery hunting privileges on the same place. And I used to go help him. I mean, I think I started doing that when I was about 9. Mm-hmm. And I remember even walking with hunters when I was like on my own, when I was like 10, spotting for them. Yep. But anyways, we were all having lunch one day at a campfire in the middle between hunts on this rifle elk hunt in Eastern Oregon. And my dad's rifle was in his probably late 80s F-150 or
can Ford. Can I interrupt you?
Yeah.
I want to pick up on this because I think I'll be able to tell it better than you can.
Go ahead.
So I always had my rifle, although I was guiding, I always had the rifle in the truck, and I would, good, bad, or ugly, had one slid into the chamber with the bolt half ajar, half open, not shut, usually with the safety on. And I mean, that's just what it was like. And I knew that David knew that he wasn't supposed to close that bolt and pull the trigger. I know that he knew that. And we're all sitting around. There's probably, I don't know, between the hunters and the guides and the ranchers and everybody, there's probably 15 to 20 of us standing around the fire. They're eating lunch. Some guys sitting down and around Davies in the pickup. And all of a sudden, kaboom, my rifle goes off. And Dave's jumping around inside the pickup, and I mean, there's smoke in there he shot into the ground, through the floorboard of my pickup. And the old rancher guy there, the guy that owned the ranch, he looked at me and he goes, "I don't think you'll have to say anything further to him." So we never discussed it. We never talked about it again. He learned his lesson.
I was petrified. Well, one of our friends came around and lectured me, if I remember correctly.
Oh, was that Greg, Mark?
He was either Mark? Greg or Mark. But I was petrified. There was nothing needed. It was awful. I felt horrible. And then your truck wouldn't start. Right? And we couldn't yeah. figure out why your truck wouldn't start. So you guys had to literally dig into the 3-inch thick owner's manual, and you found like there's an emergency shutoff switch when it gets into a collision.
There's some kind of an impact button or something that shut it off because of a fuel pump or something, or I don't know what.
No, it was. Maybe I don't know. It happens during a collision where it shuts the systems off or something. But you guys found this button and turned it back on, and I learned a valuable lesson. But other than that, I was very fortunate to have, although you guys kind of let me do what I want in terms of firearms and all that, you also taught me how to use them safely and responsibly. And I never really, again, thankfully, other than that stupid incident, which could have been really bad, had anything terrible happen. I mean, I cut my hands with broadheads and knives and stuff like that, but I was pretty lucky. We had growing up in the woods like that, I'm so fortunate for that. Like that shaped who I am. I mean, it really did. Cause I wasn't book smart. I don't see myself as overly talented in any shape or form. I just believe that I was able to really hone my skills very early and then transfer them over into, the actually having real tags. And I started off because of you started me off in a really, the hardest way to bow hunt, which is with a traditional bow. I didn't start off with a compound. I didn't start hunting with a compound at all until I was 37 years old. I hunted with a
37. Yeah, you hunted for 22 years or 25 years with nothing but a
25
recurve.
years with a recurve bow and a few rifle tags sprinkled in there, mostly when I was young. But for the most part, I didn't really. I mean, I shot a couple bucks when I was really young with a rifle, but other than that, I didn't even really rifle hunt as well until I was probably 35 ish. So because of that, though, I learned how to get really close and stalking skills and a lot of disappointment and a lot of failure, a lot of target panic. Yeah, I'm appreciative for that. But so here we are in rural Oregon, Dad, and you're kind of you're professionally at this time an entrepreneur. Tell us a little bit about what you did professionally when I was growing up.
I was a commercial fisherman prior to when I got my real estate license in 1978. And by the time Dave was born, I had already morphed into somebody who because of my love of the outdoors and everything, I determined really quickly that I didn't want to do anything having to do with improved structures or commercial properties or anything like that. So I started doing things out in the country, and I ran into an old guy that was a timber guy, and he kind of took me under his wing, and I learned a lifetime of stuff about timberland, forest land management from this guy as he pampered me along for several years until he retired. And that's what kind of launched me into doing what I do, which is I am a rural property forest land expert. And it's not book learned, not college learned. My college was pre-medicine and had nothing to do with what I do now or ended up morphing into. But it gave me the opportunity to be outside, to be around elk and deer. And when I have to go to the coast and look at property, well, guess what happens when I go to the coast to look at property? If the river's in good shape, I turn it into a business fishing trip. And, that's just, it worked out perfect for me. A lot of things I could have done differently might have worked out at a monetary level a lot more, way better. But looking back, I'm not giving up a day of what I did when I could have been doing some things. And
You've never had a 9 to 5.
Never had a 9 to 5. Never had a 9 to 5. The last paycheck that I got was when I was 16. I worked at a service station. So I did have kind of a 9 to 5, but 16 and 17, I worked at a service station. When I graduated from high school, I decided that I wanted to become a commercial fisherman. And I talked this guy, lived here in Dallas, that had a commercial salmon dory, into leasing his dory. And when I was 18, I pulled that sucker down to the coast, never commercial fished in my life, and started fishing in the ocean by myself for salmon. And that actually evolved into something that I became quite good at. And I think I did that up through 1978. And then the kids started showing up. Luke was born and you were born, and it was time to make a choice between the ocean or being a dad. And that's when it got directed towards real estate and ended up being into the forestry rural property thing.
The thing that I think maybe you don't consciously realize it, but you were shaping your time. You valued time. Like, there's one thing about you. You take your damn time. Like, you go fishing, you go hunting, you go golfing, and you don't want anybody telling you what to do when it comes to that. And that's how you've always been. And that's where I got it from. I remember you being like, hey, everybody, September, I'm out. Don't call me. And back then it was great because there was no internet or cell phone. So they literally couldn't get a hold of you in all of September, and it would drive your business partners crazy, right?
Oh, we had a really sour deal happen one year that was it was catastrophic, and it was lifetime catastrophic, and ended up losing a pile of money on it. And it had happened, and it happened prior to September. And I took off on a 16-day elk hunt, and I returned from that elk hunt and had a great time. Wonderful weather, great calling was wonderful. Got back from that elk hunt, and my partner called me. And he said, "You haven't called us in 16 days. You never called me in 16 days." I said, "No." And I told you that I wasn't going to call you. I went hunting. And he said, and I said, "Here's the thing." I said, "It's not going to get better. It's going to get worse the older I get. And so if you can't handle this part of me, then we shall no longer be partners." And we were no longer partners. We're still very good friends. I play golf with him all the time. Uh, See him, talk to him, blah, blah, blah. But that was the end of the partnership. That's probably twisted because hunting, especially the September thing and the elk and that whole thing that was going on at that time in Eastern Oregon, I couldn't miss that. I remember one year, a few years after that I didn't have a bunch of money saved up or any money saved up to do it. And mom was worried about bills and so forth and so on. Well, I got that taken care of, and I was having lunch with a guy, and I said to this guy, I said, I don't even know if I got enough money to go archery hunting this year, but if I don't, I'm going to borrow it so I can go archery hunting. And he goes, "Really?" And I go, "Yeah." Well, that night my phone rings and it's that guy. And he goes, "David," he goes, "if you need money to go archery hunting," he says, "I'll give it to you and you don't even need to pay it back." Well, I didn't take it because I got enough money to go archery hunting, but that's how sick and twisted I was or am. That's why you're
I don't think some would define it that way. I don't think of it that way. I think you had a lot of vision to prioritize time doing your passion over, this false sense of security with a 9 to 5. Like, you're willing to take that risk. And I'm so glad you did, because it's one of the reasons that I have really guarded my time and structured my life to allow me to do the things I love, because I know that life's pretty finite, very finite. And it was from watching you. And I remember, like, believe me, Dad, when I was going to, especially in high school, and when my friends really started to notice what you did, I used to take a lot of criticism and get a lot of questions like, "What does your dad actually do? Does he even have a job? He's just driving around smoking cigars. He's out in the woods. He can do whatever he wants. What's his real, does he even have a real job?" And I remember I didn't know how to answer it at the time. So I would come home and I would ask you, "Dad, what should I tell people you do? They don't understand." And you're like, "Just tell them I'm an entrepreneur. That's all they need to know. It's none of their business, really." But now that I look back, I realize that, I don't blame those people for asking those questions, because they'd grown up in a more traditional sense of you go to school at 18, you get out of school, you get a job, and you retire when you're 65. And that whole model, which there is nothing wrong with that, but that's just not how you were, or how
Absolutely
I was
not.
raised, or
Not
how
a
I
thing.
am now. In fact, one of your best friends, I've asked him, he's one of the best men I know. Eric, he lived that way. He worked very hard his whole life, just retired here recently. And I asked him recently, he worked in a normal 9 to 5 job his whole life. I asked him recently, he hunted and fished and he's done all kinds of things, but he always did it on his day off or on his vacation. And he told me, "I have no regrets. I've loved my life. I don't need to make more money. I love the security of a paycheck." And I respect that. And I love that. And he is really a truly happy man. And he's lived an incredible life. So I'm not suggesting that what you and I do is the right way, or nor do I recommend it, because it comes with a lot of highs and lows. But
No,
I am appreciative
I
that
think
that you did that.
I think that talking about Eric and I's the way that we talk about how he is, how I am, what it did. He is really a special guy, and he worked the last 20 some years of his life as a prison guard, but he structured it 20 some years of his working life. He structured it, always trying to bid it so that he had the 312s where he worked 36 hours or 38 hours or whatever in a row. And then he would have 4 days off. And during those 4 days off, he fished. I mean, he fished, and, and he went out and he did a lot of stuff, but he he structured it like that. Prior to that, he worked at a mill, but he was always focused on when he was going to reach the age of 65 or 66 and finally, get away from that and have all of these things set up for his retirement. And he accomplished that, and it's awesome. And he's having the best time now. Like he says, as long as I have enough gas in my pickup to get to the river, that's all I need. And Eric's got a lot more than a few bucks to put gas in his pickup, but that's what he always tells me. That's all I can. He says I can drive 20 minutes from my house. You know how hard it is for us to drag him out. Like last year, we drug him to Montana for the Western hunting seminar and Western Hunting Summit. And once he gets going on those things, he likes them. But he is a very happy man as long as there's a few fish in the river and a few Roosevelt elk running through the alders and the spruce and the hemlock over here in the coast, that he can go down and chase around for half a day or 3/4 of a day and then come back to his environment. That's what he does. That's what he does.
Yeah,
Super
he's
guy.
He's a great man. He's a great man. So at what point did you get into golf? Because golf is a pretty big part of your life now. And I think I started playing when I was 11, Dad?
Yeah, I think you were a little bit younger than that. 1990 is when I got into golf. So you'd been 10.
I was 10. Okay.
Yeah. 1990 was when I got into golf, and it was because the guy that I told you that we broke up because of my 16-day of hunting thing. We were partners, and we bought a corporate membership at a country club. I didn't even own golf clubs. Time evolved. I really got into the golf. The golf reminded me a lot of archery, and that may sound weird to people who hate golf that are archers, but it is a lot like instinctive archery, which is what I've always done. And it just became a big part of my life. And fishing had started kind of fizzling at that point from what it was in the 70s and 80s when it was phenomenal. And I liked it. And I started golfing a lot. And one of my fishing buddies, my old fishing buddy back then, is Rob Cleaver. He said to me, he goes, "Why do you like golf? You don't fish hardly anymore." I said, "Because I got tired of going to the river and there were no fish. Every time I go to the golf course, it's there."
Yeah. And I remember when you first started, you were obsessed with it. There was golf clubs laying all over our house.
Yep.
And balls. And so I picked it up and I started swinging in the yard. And still one of my best memories of my entire childhood is you got me into junior golf, and I started playing a few tournaments. We should mention also that you were a part owner in a local 9-hole golf course.
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as you got into that, I started playing all the time. I remember one day, my buddy Justin and we played 96 holes in one day, and that is a true story. And we walked. There was no golf carts. That was from daylight to dark on a 9-hole course, folks. Don't freak out. Don't try to call my bluff. It's true. And anyways, got super into it, got pretty good at it. And, you got me into these tournaments. And the first time I went to this summer state tournament, no one knew who I was. And I wasn't one of the regular kids that won everything. And you had this belief in me, Dad, that I could play this tournament. I didn't know. I just go play Dallas Golf Club every day. I didn't know if I could play this tournament or do any good. I had qualified. I think I won the qualifier.
You won. We qualified at Spring Hill Country Club. You went down to Spring Hill Country Club and shot 76 and took
74. I remember 74.
Yeah. Number one seed from that division down to the state championships. But we got down there, and in the qualifying round down there to get into the match play for the state championship, you were one stroke inside of the championship bracket. So you were
Which
last.
Means I was last place.
You were the last. You were last place going into the bracket, and so you had to play the kid the next day that was the number one seed, a kid out of Bend. And I remember his mom coming up to me that night. We were all staying kind of at the same motel down there in Medford, and his mom came up to me at night and she put her arm on my shoulder and she goes, "No, no matter what happens tomorrow, she says, your son should be proud that he made the championship bracket. And you went out and kicked his ass. You had him, you ended up winning like 5-4 or something, and went, whoa, you took out the number 1 seed. And you went on to win the state championship. It was cool.
Yeah. And it was match play, and I was never down once.
Nope.
And it was actually but the memory I was going to talk about was because I didn't know, I just remember this blind ignorance of like, I don't know, I'm just going to hit the ball. I'm not worried about like winning or losing or anything. I didn't even consider myself that competitive. I just was going to play golf and just see what happened. I wasn't worried about outcomes. I just had this blind optimism. I think I got from you, Dad, because you have a lot of blind optimism too. We get, we both married realists and we're optimists.
Eternal
Yes.
optimism.
And I'm like, oh, this can't be so bad. I'll just go hit the ball around the course and I'll just beat these guys. And I remember on the 17th hole in the finals, I actually didn't play very good that day, but I was still winning. I was 1 up on 17. So there's
1 up
2
going
more
into
holes.
17. Yep.
Yes. So there's 2 more holes to go. And so if I won 17, I win the tournament. And I remember it was a par 3. I hit my shot just short and right of the green. I can't remember where he hit his, but
Long left.
And all I had to do was get up and down and I win the tournament is basically the way I looked at it. Par wins because I think he bogeyed.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never forget, I hit that chip and it went like a foot from the hole. And so I knew I was gonna win. And I remember looking over and seeing you so excited. And it's weird that I have these vivid memories because it's just certain moments I have these memories. Other moments are kind of like I don't have the clearest memory. I wish I did, but I remember this. And then I went and tapped it in, and I remember the hug that you and I had on that green. It was vividly. It was so special to me. That was one of my favorite memories of my childhood. I mean, there's 100 others, but that was kind of a new phase in the recreational side of our life into golf, and golf ended up being a pretty big part of our life, which a lot of my followers don't really know that because I don't talk about it a lot. Because I haven't played a lot over the last 15 years, ever since I started my career at Sitka, which kind of took over my life for about a decade. But I am getting back more into it now that my kids are showing interest, and it's all because you picked up a club in 1990. And I'm proud of that too, because the golf is very similar to hunting. It is so similar. A lot of people think of it as this, stuck up, yuppie, rich people thing. And I get it. There's a lot of that for sure. You do need money, and to be part of an expensive country club. But these days, golf is very accessible to anybody. And if you actually go out and try it, what you will realize is one, you get to spend the whole day exercising outside, which is good for you, right? It takes about 4.5 hours to play 18 holes on average. So you're out for half a day outside, exercising, walking 4 to 6 miles, depending on the golf course. So you're getting your exercise, you're outside, which is good. Most of us don't get enough of that. You're working on your coordination, you're exercising your brain on making decisions and setting strategies and executing those things. Most importantly, you're failing for 99.9999% of the time and having to pick yourself up and hit the next shot, pick yourself up, hit the next shot. It's a very humbling and disappointing and frustrating, but also like excessively exciting when you succeed type of sport, just like bow hunting. It's a lot like bow hunting.
It's a lot like bow hunting.
Except like Dad said, you don't have to wait for the season. You can do it every day. You don't have to wait for tags. You don't have to worry about regulations. If you want to cheat, you can cheat. You got to live with it, but you can do it. No one's going to give you a ticket. But it really is an incredible sport. I had a debate, Dad, the other day with a couple of my family, my brother-in-law, my 2 brother-in-laws, who are big sports fans. And I said, I make the argument that if you looked at sports holistically, meaning physical endurance and mental endurance, or physical skill and mental skill, that golf, like Tiger Woods, who's the best golfer that's ever existed, is probably one of the best athletes of all times if you do it holistically. not just physical ability, although his physical ability is pretty incredible too. If you do that, then you're going to start getting into soccer or some other sport, maybe endurance running. I don't know. But if you add the mental aspect of golf, which is incredibly complex and difficult and never even remotely mastered by anybody, I think it's the hardest sport. I would love this. You guys should send me DMs and tell me how wrong I am, but that's what I think. But I'm thankful that you introduced me to it. And I'm actually really hopeful that at least one of my kids gets into it, because I want to coach their golf team. It's one of my lifelong dreams, is to coach a high school golf team. So Dad, that happened. And then we all started getting older and adding a lot more disappointment to your life, because we all started, doing what rural redneck country kids do, which is when they're bored, they party, they drink, they get into trouble. And that was really my first memories of disappointing you guys. Specifically, I remember one time I had a party at our house when you guys were gone somewhere.
The mud bog.
Yeah. And my friends decided that it would be a good idea that they would turn our backfield into a mud bog all night and spin cookies out there all night. Literally, it's probably a half-acre field. Turn it into 100% mud and spray that mud all over our house, in addition to leaving all the beer cans and cigarette butts and whatever other gross shit. And then I remember I woke up the next morning in a drunken stupor, and I looked around and I'm like, shit, I better get out of here. And I remember I went over to my friend Brian's house and I kind of just tried to suppress the whole situation. And you called his house and you said, get your ass home right now. I remember. And I was scared shitless.
Oh boy.
And I pulled in the driveway and I got out of my truck, and you got in my face and let me have it. And that was one of many times I have disappointed you in my life, but I remember that vividly, and I'm sorry for that. But, I was a young, stupid, rural kid trying to find my way. And I'm not proud of those days, but, they happened.
Yeah, that was, I'm not sure all what went on at that party, but it looked like somebody had marched herds of elk entirely through my house with mud all over their feet. And you guys had already cleaned up a bunch. She told me we cleaned up, and Mom and I opened up the door, and that house, it was just full of muddy footprints. Somebody fell through our roof, and because that was the stadium. All the guys were up on the roof, jumping up and down when they were mud bogging and cheering. And, it must have been quite a party.
I do remember telling you that we cleaned up. The problem is my friends love them to death, but they would wake up in the morning and leave me with all the mess. And that was actually, I think that was one of the last parties I threw at our house. That was when
I don't remember after that.
Yeah, I'd had it. I'm like, you know what, guys? If you want to do that, do it somewhere else, because I just got my ass kicked.
Because we let all of you kids, knowing kids are kids, and we let all of you kids, we would much rather have had you at our house being stupid than out on the highway being stupid. So we let you do that. We would put you out in the other part of the house and let you do your thing. So that's just what we decided was the way we wanted to bring you up.
It was different. It was different times. You can't do that these days.
No.
And yeah, but I mean, I think, Luke and Blake and I, we turned out all right, and we're appreciative of the way you guys raised us. And, there was definitely a lot of highs and lows. I remember times when you guys didn't have I remember times when you had a lot of money to me, and I remember times when you guys didn't have any money. I remember the time when you had to buy a $500 van that I would classify as a rapist van. And drive it for like a half a year, take me to school in it and everything. And I remember times when we were going to Hawaii, and, living the high life. And I think you managed it really. I'm really impressed with the way you managed the stress of that. Now that I'm an adult and I know how stressful, like, being responsible for a family is.
Well, life takes so many ups and downs and turns and stuff. And the period of time that you're talking about was a real growing time for us, because I lost two sisters in a period of 2 or 3 years. Had that financial thing that we talked about earlier with, with the 16-day alcohol, just several things that all kind of snowballed there together. And I kind of lost, good thing I'm a huge optimist, because I kind of lost desire, not to live. I mean, I wanted to live, but I just lost desire. I didn't have a lot of enthusiasm, particularly after my younger sister got killed in the wreck up in the pass. It just really deflated me for a few years, and counseling helped, but it took a while to work through that. So there were some times there when it was pretty lean, but got through it, worked through it, and learned a lot from it, and trudged on. Yeah, you're right. And I didn't pay $500 for that van. I paid $5 for it.
Oh, well, I'm glad you had wheels, but I don't think that van was worth $5. It literally had like one window and like carpet on the inside, and smelled like pot. So, but we can laugh about those times now. But yeah. Your sister Margie was killed in a car accident in like 1994.
7-6.
Okay.
No, I think Linda died in 1994 of an aneurysm.
Okay, so your older sister Linda died of a brain aneurysm when how old was Linda?
42.
She was my age.
Yeah.
When she died of a brain aneurysm, and then just a few years later, your younger sister Margie was killed tragically in a car accident on the Santiam Pass between Bend and Salem. Mm-hmm. And then not too long after that, one of Linda's sons, my cousin,
died. That's right. I forgot about Jay. That was another thing that happened like a year and a half later. He died of a very rare disease, my nephew.
Yep. And then your mom was really sick.
My mom was very sick.
And you were having money issues, and we were coming into our teenage years. It was a very I can only imagine how stressful that time was. But what I've always been impressed with you and Mom specifically is, at least looking up at you guys, you handled it very well, and you didn't transfer a lot of that stress to us. You led your way through it, and you did a great job. I remember the night your younger sister Margie was killed. I remember I was sitting I was talking to Brent Erickson on the phone in your bedroom. We used to talk on the phone every night about hunting and shit. And, I remember the police officers coming through the front door, and, my, mom falling to her knees crying, and it was awful, 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 obviously. But cheers to you and Mom for weathering all those storms and making it to today with hopefully 3 kids you're proud of. And
you got boys, the three, my 3 boys, or our 3 boys, there's nothing there but to be proud of. 3, you couldn't have 3 more different people. It's like, how could you be from the same parents? But it's really fun for us to watch.
Yeah. No, we so appreciative. So with all that said, Dad, do you have, if you could go back and change anything about your life, what would you do?
Probably would have stayed at the coast. I think would be the biggest thing. My love for the ocean and the coast, I can fulfill it by driving 40 miles. But I think that, and we still talk about getting a place at the coast or buying a place at the coast. And we've owned a couple of summer homes over there and so forth. But I just think that it would have been a good idea for us to stay at the coast. Closer to the fishing, closer to the things that I have to drive 40 or 50 minutes or an hour. And your mother loves the ocean. She loves the beach. It's what feeds her soul. I think that that might be one of the main things. I have no regrets about not finishing college. I still wonder how in the hell I got through high school. I think they wanted to get rid of me. I think the only reason they kept me is because I could pole vault. But I just don't. I don't have a lot of regrets, which is super cool. Yeah, I don't.
Super cool.
Yeah, I don't. I think that's one thing that I'd do to change my life would be that I would go back and a little caveat to that. In 1978 or 79, when Luke was born and I was still commercial fishing, and we had a place at the coast. We had a house at the coast, and I had a friend that was a big commercial fisherman, and he had a salmon trawler, a 66-foot salmon trawler that was named the Reliance. And he was moving from salmon to shrimp, and he had bought a couple big boats in New Orleans or over back east and was bringing them back. And he asked me if I was interested in entering into a lease option to run the Reliance, to troll the Reliance, fish for salmon in the Reliance, which would mean that I would have been gone from the 1st of April through September into even October, because that would be a boat that you'd stay out for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 days at a time, salmon fish. It was my dream to do that. I mean, I loved the ocean and loved fishing in the ocean for salmon. Loved it, and I was good at it. I came home. I told Mom. I said, I have an opportunity. I can do that. We could do that. I said, but I would be gone from April through October or into October. Not with the family much. And Luke was born. I think she was pregnant with. No, she wasn't pregnant with you. Luke was 1, and we decided that was not a way that we wanted to A, have our relationship be, and B, we wanted more kids and have our kids. So we made the decision to not take that next step level up in the commercial fishing industry. I don't regret it because of the way that things turned out, ultimately having 3 wonderful boys and all the different things that happened to me after that. It would have definitely changed the course of life. Who knows where it would have gone. The only reason that I do regret it is I would have loved to have at least run that boat for 1 summer to see how many freaking salmon I could have caught. Because salmon fishing was really good then. This boat was set up really cool. It was, like I said, it was 66 foot long, had the capacity to stay out for 7 to 10 days. I would like to have tried it once, but didn't. But
Okay, last question. Do you have any advice for parents out there that are inspired by the way that you parented, or the way that you've lived? Any advice that you've had? You've lived an amazing life, and anything else you want to throw out there to anybody listening that might take it as inspiration to do something positive for theirs?
I don't know why my father told me I was an eternal optimist, and he was correct. I don't know how you can transfer that to anybody by telling them to be an eternal optimist, but I don't dwell on the negative. I learn from the negative, and I'm resilient. I wanted my kids to be resilient. I think I tell you all the time in our business dealings, hey, if it doesn't work, we move on. We don't, hey, okay, that didn't work. We move on. You can't stay back. You find out why. You look and say why, and in most cases, why. In our business, okay, we know why that failed, but you can't dwell on it. You can't let it drag you from keeping moving forward. So I'm an eternal optimist. I'm one phone call away from the best deal in the world. I mean that, any minute it can happen, any second. Like I always told you with your bow, it takes 0.3 of a second to kill a bull elk. 0.3 of a second, and it can happen anytime. That's what kept me. A little positive keeps me clawing. Keeps me moving forward, even if there's a bunch of negative behind it. And I probably learned that during that dark period. During that period where the luck wasn't running real good. But there's always something always clawing a little bit and moving forward. So I don't know whether that answers your question or not. Eternal optimism.
Absolutely. No, I remember one of the things that I forgot to mention that I'm so appreciative of is you always telling me thousands of times that anything is possible. You can do anything. You have all the talent in the world. You just got to put the work in and do it. Just go do it. You can do anything. And I don't know, there's a lot of people out there that just didn't get that support, or maybe struggle to give that support, whatever it might be. That stuff goes a million miles in being a parent or just being a friend or a spouse or whatever, just that, even if it's not technically true, it doesn't matter. Just a little bit of optimism. Realism is great. Skepticism's okay. Like, all the isms are okay. But I think a heavy dose of optimism, the world could use it. And I think you, Dad, are a great example of that. And I'm appreciative of that. And now I'm an eternal optimist like you. And my wife is a realist, and we balance each other out really well. I'll say, I want to take on the world and make $1 billion. And she'll be like, well, how about we scale that back to something a little bit more realistic? And that's fine. I need that, because I'd probably run off some cliffs. So
that sounds like the discussion that takes place nearly daily at my house.
Yeah.
It's a balancing act, but it's just a balancing act.
Well, Dad, I appreciate you coming on, and I'm looking forward to getting Mom on, and Blake and Luke, and putting together this series. And any last thoughts?
Let's draw some tags this year and go to Montana and have a good time hunting elk. I need a great elk hunt for my soul. I love the Roosevelts. I'm glad we're hunting. We've done it. You took care of the full circle. We're out of there now. We can't top that one. We need to go east.
That we didn't talk about the how special the bull was this year, but we'll save that for another podcast, because I'm still wrapping my head around that.
That was special.
Yeah, but I agree with you. Let's go hunt the Rockies this year. And I stated my goal this year. I'm gonna shoot a 350 plus Rocky Mountain bull with my bow, and nothing else hunting wise matters much to me other than that this year. So let's do it. And we'll make this a tradition, Dad. I'd like to get, actually what I want to do, Dad, is I want to get you, Walt, and Eric, your two best friends, on the podcast all at the same time. And I want to bullshit about the good old days of Oregon hunting.
You'd get some dandy stories out of that crew.
I know Cody Rich already did that with you and Walt, and I think he told me people loved it. So I think we should do that again. Maybe Cody comes on and we just do a big deal together. That'd be fun.
Oh, that'd be fun. I always enjoy talking with Cody.
Yeah. All right, Dad. Have a great day. Thank you for coming on.
Too.
Hey guys, don't forget, subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Altitude Show. All these videos, including this interview, are on there. Go support our partners, peaksequipment.com. If you need, you do need trekking poles, gaiters, you need a headlamp. We're coming out with a teepee in February, a hot tent, which is going to be incredible. You need to go check out peaksequipment.com. Use my code altitude. If you're an experienced hunter or a non-experienced hunter, you need to learn more. You need to constantly be learning. You use gohunt.com as a hub for your learning. Between their maps, their gear shop, and all their strategic planning, their odds, they have all things hunting on there. They're the hunting company. Go check them out. At checkout, use my code altitude. And also Outdoor Class. Outdoor Class, you can learn from the likes of Corey Jacobson, Randy Newberg, Remy Warren, and many, many more. John Barklow. Doesn't matter if you're experienced or not. It doesn't matter. We can all learn. So again, use the code altitude. And I appreciate your help, all of that, all the support, and we're going to keep these coming out.